So I'm going to make a short video that will guide you into setting up the MVI56 SIE module to allow a Roku controller to talk to a Siemens controller. So just a basic setup of how we're going to do it is we're going to have our Allen Bradley controller PLC, and inside this Allen Bradley PLC we're going to have the MVI56 module. So now we're going to have this module talk to a Siemens PLC. And they're going to communicate via Siemens Industrial Ethernet. So this is going to be the basic setup that we're going to make. So now, in order to do this, the first thing that we have to do is we want to go to the ProScript website. And then at the ProScript website, we're going to go into Roku in chassis modules. What we want to do, we want to download the add-on instruction to work with the MVI56 SIE module. So control logics, we scroll down. The module that I'm using is the MVI56E module. We click that, we go to downloads, and then what we want to do, we want to download the sample ladder. So once that is downloaded, you need to extract it to a location that you won't forget, that will be convenient for you to access. So once that is done, we go over, we open our ISLogix 5000. From ISLogix 5000, we want to open a new project. Want to create a new project. We give it a name, call it test for SIE. Make sure that this is our controller, the slot is at 0, and we create it in a directory that we want to create. Then we click OK. So once that is done, we want to add a new module. Add a new module. The SIE module is a generic module. So generic module we create, we give it a name, make sure that the data type is data integer, the slot of your module mine is in slot 3, and then we set our instances and our input output sizes. And we click OK. Once that is done, the next thing is we want to import the add-on instruction that we just downloaded from the ProScript website. So we go to our main routine, we right click, we want to import rags. We go to the directory where we had saved our rag, we select our add-on rag, and then we click import. Now once you're importing, you're going to have a window come up like this. And then what you want to make sure is that you don't have any red flags like this one that we see here, because this red flag indicates that we have an error on our tags. So we go to that red flag, we see we're in local 1, we want to change this to our particular module which is in local 3. That means local chassis slot number 3. Output, and then our flags disappear and we click OK. So once that upload is done, we can delete this. And our ISLogix is ready, so now we want to download it to our controller. So we go to our Ethernet network, we select our particular controller, and then we download. Then it asks us to put in remote run, so we click that OK, and our controller is now running. We can see that we don't have any errors on this display. So now once this is running, the next thing that we want to do is we want to configure our SIE module from our PCB. So we open our PCB software, we add a new module. We want an MVI56E SIE module. And we click OK. So now the first thing that we want to do is we want to change the Ethernet configuration to make sure that the Ethernet configuration matches that of our module. Then once that is done, we want to go into our module settings. These will map how the internal database and the SIE or the backplane driver map information. So from here we state where in the internal database we want to start to read, how much we want to read, where we want to start to write, and how much we want to start to write. So you have to make sure that whatever commands you have in your SIE clients are consistent with this form of mapping. So once this is done, we're going to go into our SIE client, let's say client 1, and we want to add commands. So we add row, add row. Now we read into position, internal database position 1, we read. So let's say we're going to read 5 registers. Here we have to put the IP address of our Siemens controller. Here we select the type of controller that I'm using. Make sure that the rack and the slot number are consistent with the rack and slot number of your controller. Now if you're using a 1200, 400 or 300 controller, you can disregard the SAP value, but these have to be correct. If on the other hand we're using an S200 controller, we can disregard this one, but the TSAP value has to be correct. So now we want to put a function read, and we're going to read from an internal database, call it database number 1, and we'll start reading from register 0. And we're going to read 5 counts into our own internal database. So we click OK, and then we'll move on to configuring the next command. So once both the commands are configured and we have enabled all our commands, we can click OK. And then we can go and download this onto our module. We browse, this will open our process of discovery service. We choose our module, test our connection, and download. So once this is done, we click OK, and we are halfway through. So the first thing that we want to do is to make sure that our backplane communication is fine. So we go to our ISLogix file. We go to our controller tags. We want to set certain values in our controller that we expect to see in the internal database. So we go to monitor, we go to SIE, we go to data. We want to write values into our internal database. So let's say we write 5 values. We expect that if we go back to our PCB and we go into diagnostic, once the diagnostic page is open, we can check our backplane status to see that that is okay. We're reading, we're writing, we're passing, so that's fine. We go into our internal database, and we can see from our internal database at the positions to which we are writing values from the backplane, which is position 1000 from our previous mapping, and we see these values, which are the same values that we entered in our ISLogix file. So once this is done, we have proved that our backplane is working just fine. So now we have to move on to the Siemens side. Now the Siemens side will be programmed using, because my controller is a Siemens 1200 controller, I was using Total Integrated Automation Portal. Our TIA portal, we create a new project, we configure our device, we want to add a new device, we select the type of controller that we're using. I'm using a 1200. Then we add the controller to our project. Once the controller has been added to our project, we want to go to the start menu. We're going to go to program blocks because we want to create a data block, which is where we're going to be writing and reading our values from. So we can create that automatically. It becomes data block 1. Make sure that the data block name is consistent with the data block name that we set in our SIE configuration. Then we click OK on that. Then we're going to put values into our database, into our data block. So let's call it data weight 0. Make sure it's an integer type. Another data weight. We make another data weight. So once you've done and you've made your register tag in your data block, what we want to do is we want to change the access ability of our data block so that anyone from outside can access inside. So we uncheck the optimized block access, then we click OK. Then we can see from here that now we have an offset for each of the values that we set up, so they can be offset. They can be offset from an internal address, an internal mapping address. So now we want to make that internal mapping address. So we go to PLC tags. We show all tags. We want to add a new tag, and this tag has to be in the name of our data block. So you have to make sure that it's in the name of your data block. Then your data type, in this case, is going to be integer, and then we assign it an address, and we click OK. And then once this is done, we are done with configuring the SIM inside. We want to download this program onto our PLC. So before we do that, we want to go to our controller back. We want to go back to our controller. So we go to our PLC. Now in our controller, we want to change the controller settings so that we can set an interface network, which is the interface network that is going to use to talk to the SIE module, also the interface that is going to use to download the program that we've just made. So we want to create a new subnet. We put this in the name, in the IP address of our module, of our PLC, sorry, the IP address of our PLC, our Siemens PLC. We put in our gateway. And then once that is done, that's done. So now we've set our subnet. If you go to network view, you can see the subnet that we just made. Then the next step is downloading now onto our PLC. We select our subnet, and then we search for all devices that are on the subnet. Then we can see our PLC controller comes in there. We select the controller, and then we load the program. So it will ask us we continue without synchronizing. We stop all the modules that are currently running on our controller, and then we download. Once the load is finished, we click finish, and that was JAWS that are running on the controller. So once the download is done, we can go back to our PCB. From our PCB, we can go to diagnostic. Like to our module, we can go to diagnostic. We want to see whether the SIE commands are working properly from the SIE command status. So we can see here our backplane is still fine. We move on to our client. We're using client 1. We go to status. We can see here we don't have any error. Current error is 0. We send our requests and our response. If we go to our command status, everything is 0, so it shows that our commands don't have any error. Now we want to confirm that there is communication between the Siemens side and the Allen Bradley controller. So we can go back to our TIA. We go into the internal database that we just made, the data block that we made. So data block 1. Alright, so we're going to enter certain values. So we can enter them as set values on the start value, and then we set the set points that will allow us to upload these values onto our controller. So we monitor, we're going to load these values into our controller. Then we can reset our set points. Alright, so once these values are loaded into our controller, we can go back to our Allen Bradley controller, and then we want to read values. We see the same values that we've just entered appear at our Roku controller side. Now we want to see if we can write values, so we go there, and then we go back to our Siemens controller. We see the values that we've just wrote. Now we can update that again, just to be sure. And we upload those set points. See, these values have changed in our Siemens controller. We can go to our Roku controller. We want to see where we read values, and we see our values have changed. So basically we have set up the SIE module, SIE MVI56E SIE module, and allowed it to communicate with the Siemens controller, thereby allowing our Roku controller and our Siemens controller to communicate with each other.